The question is like this. The Surgeon General put out an advisory about Americans being more lonely than ever. Why is this happening now?
I think it's been happening for a long time, so I'm actually not convinced that loneliness is a lot worse now. I can speak to various sort of legs of this problem. One is among young people. So there is pretty convincing evidence that tweens and teens are more lonely, more anxious and depressed. We've heard about this epidemic of anxiety and depression in young people. Pretty convincing evidence. It's related to their screen use and their social media use, but we don't really know because all the evidence is correlational. So it's a pretty good guess that the less time they spend face-to-face with other people connecting, the more time they're on a screen, the less connected they feel. And then of course COVID, did a number on a lot of us in terms of connection. So lots and lots of answers to that question.
Michal, this one's for you. Is there a difference in loneliness for someone who is single, in a bad relationship, or in a good relationship?
So I'm not an expert in the field, but from meeting and coaching and my work, I think you can be married with 7 children and feel lonely. I don't think loneliness has to always do with the number of people around you. I think it's also how you feel within yourself. So I think loneliness goes much deeper about, yes, I agree with you about how we connect with others, but also how we feel about ourselves. And a person can feel more or less lonely connected to how they're feeling, about themselves and the people around them.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone like to add?
I'll add, I guess, my favorite theory right now in psychology is called partner responsiveness theory. And it argues that the secret to relationships is feeling understood, valued, and loved. Understood, valued, and loved. And basically what we're seeing is that a lot of us are loved, but we don't feel loved. We don't feel cared for. And so I think that's something that we need to figure out, what the answer is.
And is that new? So this new need of being seen, understood, is that a new need?
Yeah. I know it's definitely not a new need, and I don't think there's data to show whether that's changed over time. So all I can really speak to is today, that many people don't feel understood, loved, and cared for, or appreciated and valued. So yeah, an important challenge.
I'm interested about this also as a parent, right? Because when I grew up, many parents today, they say to their children, you're smart, you're beautiful, you're a genius, even if they're not. My parents never said any of that to me. So I think I'm always wondering the connection between the human nature and what a human needs to feel, but also what the society tells us today that we need in order to be feeling all those feelings and the connection between them. But what has changed?
I would say, just kind of piggybacking on one of the points that were discussed earlier, that's as to why now as opposed to 50 years ago, 100 years ago. One of the things that we see different since the 1970s, 1980s, is people are less community-oriented. Less people are becoming members of their religious community. They don't go to their house of worship anymore. Less people are marrying. Less people are socializing for a variety of reasons. And that's living a much more atomistic society where you don't feel loved. Even if someone is loving you, you're in your own bubble. You don't really process what the community feels about you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to continue. This is for you, Doctor. All right. What does real social connection, sense of belonging look like? And is it more than just talking?
Is it more than just talking? Interesting, because I now am studying conversations. So I'm going to back up a little bit because there's a lot to say on this topic. So I've been studying happiness for almost 35 years. And in my work, we do happiness interventions where we try to experimentally manipulate whether someone is happy or not. We prompt people to engage in different exercises to make them happy. And I had this epiphany a few years ago that seems like a cliche. And the epiphany was that the secret to happiness is connection, that actually almost everything that works to make people happier works because it makes us feel more connected. Like I study gratitude, for example. I'll be giving a talk after this on this. So we get people to write gratitude letters. But why is it that writing gratitude letters make people happier? It's because it makes you feel more connected to the person you're writing your gratitude letter to. Anyway, so then I thought, oh, we have to study how to get people more connected, how to foster connection. That's a really big problem, hard problem, how to alleviate loneliness. Lots of answers to that. So then I thought, well, one of the keys to connection is conversation. So actually, I kind of would say that yes, we can connect without talking, but it's not that common. I mean, yeah, you can sit next to someone, you could touch, right? You don't really have to say anything, but usually we connect through conversation or social interaction. So we started studying conversations. And then we thought, okay, well, what are the keys to conversations? Well, you want to make the other person feel understood and valued and cared for in the conversation. And so I just recently actually partnered with a professor in Israel named Guy Itzchak, and he's one of the world's experts on listening. So it turns out one of the keys to a good conversation is to be a good listener. And what's called an active, high-quality listener. And you probably all can guess what that means, right? You're really present, you're asking detailed questions, you're really authentic. You can't fake it. I mean, you could kind of nod, right, and look like you're listening, but you can't fake it. People know when you're not really listening. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question that usually it does involve talking.
What's happiness?
Sure, well, we can start with that. Well, we're talking about connection, but then connection makes us happy, so we should talk about. So happiness really has two components. And the first component, people who are happy experience relatively frequent positive emotions. What do I mean by positive emotions? Joy, tranquility, pride, affection, serenity, enthusiasm, all of those are positive. People who are happy experience more positive emotions, fewer negative emotions. Of course, negative emotions are also adaptive and healthy when when they're not chronic or intense. That's one component. The second component is having a sense that your life is good, that you're progressing towards your life goals, that you're satisfied with your life. So it's sort of this emotional component, and then there's sort of a cognitive component, like I'm satisfied with my life, and I have frequent positive emotions.
Thank you. Michal, this one is for you. How can I be supportive of those in my community? Both those I know are having a hard time and those I don't.
So how
do you support?
How to support them? No, I'm thinking about what you just said, Doctor, about meeting people where they are. This is how I'm kind of paraphrasing, right, and answering your question. I think that sometimes, even when we get together, physically, by the fact that we physically get together doesn't mean that we are building meaningful relationships and community, just by the fact that our bodies are in the same place. I think the question of building community and a sense of belonging and seeing people is if something happens there, right? Something unique that makes us feel something. In order to be able to do what you just referred to, I think we need to meet people where they are and kind of go and come towards others. That means that we need to be curious about other people that are different to us, to be able to ask questions. I often see that at a Shabbat dinner at a table. We often invite people that we don't know. And it always depends if the evening is meaningful and they enjoy it or not. How much did we encourage and engage the conversation? How much did we ask? How much did we want to learn? And how much did we bring from ourselves? So I think going back to your question, I think it's to be able to build meaningful community and relationships with people that we know and we don't know, we have to take that approach of willingness to learn, huge curiosity, zero judgment, and personally, and that refers to the second part of what you said, Doctor, about the more cognitive, find something that we have in common. Like this glue, right? There's something that everyone will feel like they have a stake in this, that there's something, it could be to do something together or solve a problem together. But I don't think that we can build community just by osmosis, but just getting better people together in the same place.
Rabbi Taylor, we can't read people's minds. Should we just assume everyone is having a hard time?
Yes. I mean, the truth of the matter is that in a certain sense, it would make sense to assume that everyone is having a hard time because everyone is struggling with something. One of the interesting things that the Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, iterates in his book Together, what he says is that the underlying or sort of the undergirding premise of a lot of the issues that we have in society, be it anxiety and depression or addiction, all of these types of struggles that people are dealing with, one of the common themes that undergirds all of it is loneliness. And so even if someone doesn't outwardly seem to be struggling with loneliness in particular, they're struggling with something that having a connection with others is going to be helped by.
Mm-hmm. If I might add something, you're a therapist, so you might have heard this, but a clinician friend of mine once said to me that the DSM-5, the DSM where all the mental health conditions are described and to diagnose, the DSM-5 is loneliness in all its many forms. So basically every kind of mental health problem is associated with some kind of social deficit and loneliness.
Very good. So this question is going to be asked both to the rabbi, to the doctor and the rabbi. Okay? The question is...
Sounds like a joke.
Yeah. A rabbi and a doctor walked into a JLI conference. Okay. As a community, how can we make our congregations more connective and not just places we attend? So I don't know which one of you would like.
Rock, paper, scissors?
Well, actually, I wanted to respond to something that Michal said that actually is relevant to the answer, how we connect. Because I completely agreed with you about how, showing genuine curiosity and asking questions. When we're together, whether it's at a Shabbat table or any kind of, at a conference, at a coffee shop, any kind of community, bowling, I was thinking of Bowling Alone, the book that sort of talked about how we don't have enough social capital anymore. And this is how I put it. We all walk around with walls around ourselves. We have these walls, and we don't often put them down. And so a lot of our conversations are small talk, or maybe like medium talk. And I feel like I'm too old for small talk. Like I'm done with small talk. I mean, sometimes it's important to kind of, it's a little bit of a glue at the beginning to talk about the weather or whatever, 106 degrees outside. But I like to have deep conversations with everyone. Now, deep doesn't mean reveal your dark secrets, but it's like you're talking about something meaningful, like something meaningful that happened to you today, or the emotion you had, or a thought you had. And curiosity, I think, is like so important to be just genuinely curious. And imagine what happens with curiosity, what you can do with curiosity when there's conflict, when you're talking to someone who you don't agree with at all on anything, and you're like, why do they believe what they believe? It's just an attitude of curiosity. And so again, I'm kind of done with small talk, and I'll just end with a little anecdote. I went to a dinner party with 8 people who I didn't know, and I'm an extrovert, but still I'm like, I don't know if I want to spend time with people I don't know. And so someone decided to play a game. Okay, it's not really a game, but it's kind of like a game. We all went around the table and we said, if you really knew me, you'd know that. That's all it is. That's as simple as that. If you really knew me, and you don't have to go, if you don't have to go that deep. Some people went really deep and other people didn't, but it was all meaningful. So anyway, I just think if everyone here, like for the rest of today, prioritizes like actual kind of meaningful, deep conversations over small talk, I think that'll be a win.
So just to anchor it back to the question.
That's how to build community.
Yeah, so how to build community is through connecting,
right.
through conversation.
It's the actual, meaningful conversation, because once you have that moment, like, oh, and then you suddenly, like, you remember that person forever, and you get it, like, because people meet each other and they're like, oh, I'll text you, but they never do, right? So what will actually get you to text the person and say, like, hey, how you doing? Let's have a phone call. Let's get together for a cup of coffee. It's those moments of connection.
Thank you.
I have, just to, piggyback on that, a similar story. So I was talking to a friend recently. He's a rabbi, and he wanted to utilize a barbecue as like a way to get people together to give a class. You know, that's, you bring Jews with food, you're going to bring more people than Jews without food, right? So he had the barbecue, and the barbecue started, and everyone's having a good time, and they're talking together, and he saw that the people were really talking, and then the night just sort of continued, and everyone was very engaged with each other, and it didn't feel right to just abruptly stop it and to give a class. And so initially, after the barbecue was over and everyone said goodbye, he kind of felt bad. He was like, the whole purpose that I got everyone together for was to teach the class. Like, the barbecue was just a means of getting people in the door, and then we'll have a class. But what later dawned on him was that what the people really needed that night was the barbecue, not necessarily the class. There's a place for a class, time and place for a class, but there's also a time and a place for a barbecue. So just getting people together and talking in a real way, it's tremendously significant for a community.
Very good. Okay, this question is for you, Rabbi Taylor. Connection is clearly important. How do you differentiate between social and spiritual connection?
So what I would say is that social connection, as we've kind of been touching on, is a bit subjective. It's how I process the relationships that I have. It's subjective in the sense that I could have a lot of people and a lot of connections and a lot of people in my life, but not feel connected, not feel socially connected. So it's my subjective view, my subjective processing of the world around me. Whereas a spiritual connection is an objective truth. We are always spiritually connected with each other and with God. And so our spiritual connection is more sort of revealing an objective reality that's there, and our social connection is building or reprocessing a subjective perception of the world.
So this is off script. So in regards to a spiritual connection, is it a spiritual connection between me and you, or a spiritual connection between me and myself?
There's a spiritual connection that we have within ourselves, getting to know ourselves. There is a spiritual connection that we have amongst each other, and there's a spiritual connection that we have with Hashem. And all are important and really vital for the well-being of our lives.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Michal, back to you. Many people frequent social gatherings, but they still feel alone together. How can we make our getting together more supportive?
I feel that you touched on it. And I'm also wondering, today, for example, you spoke about the conference. I haven't felt so connected to others in a very long time. I didn't know anyone here today before, right? But I arrived and I shared something about myself on stage, and immediately we started connecting together, people sharing their most personal experiences, choosing to. It's not for everyone. And suddenly we had something in common. In my case, is dealing with anxiety. So again, what you said, I also don't do chit chat, and I don't. Even though I'm British, I'm supposed to know how to do all this kind of weather talk. But I'm really from Israel, so we don't talk about the weather. But it's nice. It's kind of it's a nice way to start. And also, speaking on a personal level, it's not for everyone, right? But I think it's also, sorry to bring the subject that I'm really passionate about, is the culture that you create within the space. I think one of the reasons that this loneliness issue that we have is that we often shy away from conflict. So it's safer maybe to connect less with each other because we want things to be safe. We want to feel protected. We don't enjoy feeling uncomfortable, raw, not knowing, out of control. So sometimes all these feelings cause us to actually take a step back, spend less time, risk. Oh, if I get married, what if this marriage doesn't work? I start a new job or I join a community. What if I don't like it? Okay, I'm not going to join. So I think, speaking about correlations, and I haven't studied this, there's a correlation between how we deal with uncertainty that often leads us to not wanting to experience uncertainty. And then where's the safest place? Just within myself, within my home. That's more certainty there. So I think it's also about educating each other that life is unknown, and allowing people to get themselves out there to live life and know that it's not always going to work the way that we want it to work, and reassure our children, and if this path doesn't work, they can choose another path. They don't always have to get it right. Not every friendship is going to flourish. These things are so connected, the education, the culture of today, everything. I think maybe this experience of loneliness is just the outcome of all these other trends that we're seeing. But again, not an expert, but that's my sense.
Thank you. All right, Doctor, back to you. Social media is here to stay. How do we use it in a way that engenders connection?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I was talking earlier, right, about the correlation between social media use for girls with unhappiness. There's some research that has some suggestions. One is active social media use tends to be associated with more happiness than passive use, which is kind of lurking and sort of reading other people's posts, where you might feel kind of FOMO, feel left out. You feel left out. You feel like everyone else is having a good time. You feel like everyone else is more attractive than you are, right? Because they're posting their most beautiful selfies. But I don't know. I really think that taking breaks from it might actually be the best way. But I also wanted to add that the social media also allows us to connect with people, that we've never been able to connect with before, right? Like our family in Israel or in other countries. And, I have au pairs. I have 4 kids too, and I've had au pairs from Europe for 23 years. And the first so many years, they were really homesick. And then suddenly something switched, and then they were no longer homesick, and that is when they started to be able to be in touch with their friends and family, like, multiple times a day. So there's also some really good things about social media and digital media as well. So I don't have a good answer to that question.
I can try. I'll take one, because I've worked in these companies for many years. Obviously, I'm not an expert in social media. I will take a Lubavitcher approach to this, if I may, or at least the one that I'm telling myself is the right, that everything has good in it, and everything has potential in it. And I always loved learning the fact that in Israel they were able to hear the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the 70s, 80s because of technology. And I found Chassidut online. I Googled depression, anxiety, fear, and I also Googled happiness, joy, and Judaism, and I found the teaching of Tanya eventually, etc. So I think that social media, and I think this new advanced tech, it has so much goodness. It, like anything else in life, it depends how we use it, and using it for the best and good ways. And we have to educate ourselves and our children on how to use it meaningfully. But again, it starts from us, right? If I am following this girl that I always was jealous at as a young girl, and I'm seeing how she's progressing her life and enlarging the image to see how she's looking today and how many wrinkles she has, I need to have a conversation with myself, Michal, let go, okay? She's doing really great. What are the issues with you, right? And then either stop following her or follow her in a more mature way. But that's the work I'm doing on myself. I can't blame Mark Zuckerberg on that. So, even though it's tempting. So I think that sometimes these behaviors with social media is also, it's a way for us to say, wait, what's not working for you that these are the behaviors that you're expressing. So that would be I see my role as a parent to help my children not avoid social media, but facilitate themselves in the context of social media, because as you very rightly said, it's not going away.
Michal, this is also for you. It is often said that one needs to help others to feel complete. Right? You need another person to complete it. Is that an accurate concept? Should we be encouraging people to volunteer more?
So I'm obsessed with volunteering. Not that I volunteer enough. I wish I did, sorry, just to make sure that I don't mislead here. I just believe that for mental health and for joy and meaning, volunteering is so helpful. I call it, in the UK, when you go to the medical clinics, the GP clinics, it says vitamin V for volunteering, and they encourage people to volunteer, when you go to see a general practitioner because it's good for you. I truly think that sometimes when we over-obsess with ourselves, what do we look like? What does my CV look like? How successful am I? Am I as successful as my neighbor? Am I pleasing my parents? Is this la la la? If we it could be really depressing because we'll never, ever, ever achieve all of those things. So channeling some of that energy from the self to do something meaningful for others, I think is just really healthy. And every time I volunteer, I know that I'm feeling much stronger, better than the person or the community or the cause that I'm doing work for.
So just to put it out there, the last time the Rebbe spoke, right before his stroke, it was Parshat Shkalim. And the Rebbe spoke about the concept of machatzit shekel, half a shekel. And the concept is that two halves make a whole. And basically, as we were saying, one Jewish person without another is really only half a coin. So this is basically bringing that from the light of the way the Rebbe saw things, the importance of having the connection of two halves, two people coming together to form a more complete level. Good? Okay. All right. This is a question for both the doctor and for the rabbi. Again, it sounds like a joke, right? Okay. Is purpose the same thing as connection?
I'd say that purpose is the thing that facilitates connection. Because when you share a similar purpose, you have the same goal, you have the same mission, that is what actually facilitates the connection between people. That's what gets us on the same wavelength to work together and we feel like we're a part of something. You know, I think in our society, a lot of the division that we see, whether it's politically or amongst different communities, is that we don't see ourselves anymore as trying to live up to the same purpose or we're not driven by the same mission. We have different goals and aspirations. You know, the thing that used to link us together, that used to connect us, let's say as a nation, was this idea that, okay, we may have different views of how to achieve it, but we're looking to go in the same direction. We have the same purpose that is undergirding everything. If we lose sense of what that purpose is, then we can't facilitate it becomes much harder anyway to facilitate a connection. So I think that purpose and connection are related, but purpose is sort of like a mechanism that helps facilitate a connection.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I don't think I have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so then this one's for you. All right. Does spirituality fill the place of companionship?
Can spirituality fill the place of
Or
companionship?
does it?
Okay, I'm not sure what that means.
So like spirituality, right? Going to synagogue,
Yeah,
praying, so on
yeah.
and so forth. Does a person feel alone if he or she maintains a spiritual lifestyle or delves into spirituality?
Okay. Well, I can speak to the research on this, the researcher. Spiritual people and religious people are happier than less spiritual or less religious people. And so the question really is why. And one of the answers is that people who are spiritual and religious, and I know those are two different things, but they often go together, have a stronger sense of community. They have stronger relationships. They have greater connection and also meaning in life and purpose, all of those things. So I'm not sure if that answers. That's the only way really I know how to answer that question is that individuals who are spiritual have stronger community and stronger connection.
I think we could maybe add on to it and say as well, I mean, I've seen it before, the Rebbe speaking to somebody through dollars or whatnot, that if the person should never feel alone, because if they're cognizant that Hashem, that God Almighty is always with them, that alleviates the feelings of loneliness.
And same thing with adversity, right? If you're undergoing a really huge challenge, that you'd never quite feel alone in coping with it, right? If you're spiritual or religious.
I'd like to add to that just that spirituality certainly helps with alleviating the feeling of loneliness, because if you feel connected, like Rabbi Goldstein said, if you feel connected above, you're never alone. At the same time, I don't know that it's a replacement for other social connections, because one of the interesting things that you see in the biblical model is Adam, the very first human being, who you can't get more spiritual than that. He was literally, formed from the dust of the earth. God breathes the breath of life into him. He's made in the image of God, the prototype for all humanity, the most spiritual creature ever to walk the earth. And what does God tell him immediately after that? It's not good for man to be alone. He creates Eve to go along with him. So spirituality is certainly helpful in the connection that we have when it comes to loneliness, but it doesn't replace the need for human companionship as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, this is for you. In such a competitive workplace or culture, how can we help others feel like we're on the same team? We're all competitive.
Okay. Okay, so in a competitive culture,
So it seems like
Yeah.
you're in a workplace and everybody is trying to get that promotion or whatever. There's that one position. But is there a way to pull it all together that we could still be the same team?
right, certainly having a couple of different ways to answer that. Having a united purpose or goal, like we're all part of this organization or company, and this is our goal, and we're in it together, and we all play like pieces of it, and so that's one way to do it, is to remind ourselves what the grand goal is for all of us. And then at the individual level, also, what is my calling? To remind ourselves, like, why am I doing this? Now, not all of us are lucky enough to have a job that's a calling. And a calling basically is when, well, you know what it is, you're really called to do it. There's research on the difference between jobs, careers, and callings, right? So a job is something you just do for money to pay the rent. A career is basically a job with advancement, but you still just only do it to pay the rent. And then a calling is sort of above that. So but almost any kind of, what's interesting is almost any kind of profession can be seen as a calling. So there's a famous study that showed that hospital cleaners and dishwashers were interviewed, and a third of them said that their jobs were their calling. And so you might wonder, how can it be a calling to clean hospital rooms? And they said, so again, to tie it back to the question, it's, to sort of remind yourself, what is your meaning? Why are you doing this? And they said, it makes them feel so good to sort of help patients, basically. They're helping the patients, they clean their rooms, they'll even rearrange the furniture and the paintings for the long-term patients so that they have some variety, and they talk to them, and so they have connection through their work as well. Anyway, so remind ourselves, like, what is the meaning and purpose behind our work?
I just wanted to ask a question, being that we're coming out of the pandemic. And I guess this would be directed to you. So there's something to be said, I'm sure there's scientific data there. The difference between being connected through Zoom, virtually, versus in person. Can you share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of thinking and research on this, and I kind of got obsessed with this for a while. Here's a fun fact. When we speak, the vibrations are sent through our bones. And so when we're in person, when we're in person, the experience of talking to someone is just so different than we're on Zoom. And sometimes you just can't put your finger on it, even though you could see them, you could hear them. You can't touch them. But it's so different. So that's one difference, actually, that a drama teacher told me about, how we literally don't feel those vibrations, and we don't even notice it because we don't know what that feels like. But there's quite a bit of research on this. The conclusion from everything that I know is that even virtual connection is still good. It's still really good. So that's one conclusion. So don't downplay that. It's much better to have that FaceTime call than not at all. And it's very close to actually in person. And the more we use it, the more we get used to it. Another thought is that voice. I have a study that shows that what really matters is voice. And so anything that involves voice is really connecting. So that's phone calls or video calls or in person. So phone calls actually can be more connecting than video calls. There's something about voice, right? Very human. But again, the point of all of this, I think, is that humans are hardwired to connect in person and to touch and to smell and to feel those vibrations. And so that's why it feels unnatural. But clearly the more we do it, and I think 3 years later, we're just much more, I don't know, it just feels more natural, right? A little bit to have those those Zoom calls. So yeah, but don't, yeah, I think we still value any kind of connection, even when it's across a screen.
Thank you. All right, Rabbi Taylor, how do we make our communities more resilient?
So I think it all starts at home. It starts with yourself. And I had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Chatay in an interview earlier today, and his main forte is resilience. And so we were talking about that resilience is really helped and facilitated by feeling like you're part of something bigger. That's a key in the resilience, in experiencing resilience. So to feel like you are part of a community, to join a community, to join a group, but even on a smaller level, you can feel that you're part of a community and that you're part of a greater environment of human beings by doing something as simple as when you're in the cashier line, greeting and making even small talk with the cashier in line, just treating them like a human being, making this sort of human interaction. Because that little interaction, even though it's a very superficial, casual, short dialogue, you're still part of something bigger. Not just you living in your own world, doing your own thing, you're part of a greater society. And in a deeper way, you can certainly invite your neighbors and friends and over for dinner and things like that to, again, facilitate this deeper connection amongst a group of people.
All right. Rabbi Taylor. In times of hardship, our communities come together and we all support one another. How do we do this when we aren't hurting?
So, for better or worse, one of the roles of a rabbi is to perform funerals. And over the years, done a fair share. And one of the things that are commonly said by families at a funeral is that, sort of the silver lining in all of this, of this passing, is that the whole family that never gets together got together. And it works a very similar way on a community level as well. All of a sudden, when there's some anti-Semitic incident that takes place, all of a sudden, the Jewish community around the world gets together, we're arm in arm, we're making speeches and rallies and holding events, and all to combat anti-Semitism. And I think it goes back to the idea that at that moment, we have a shared mission. It's like we're all together combating anti-Semitism. And so if we can think of other more positive things that we can rally around, one of the things that really inspired me a bunch of years ago, Alan Dershowitz, the attorney, spoke by the Kinus HaShluchim. And one of the things that he mentioned was what inspired him about the Rebbe was that even though the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who has obviously very high religious ideals, whenever he would speak to somebody, even somebody who their lifestyle wasn't necessarily completely in sync with his, he'd only speak about those things that they would agree on and built the relationship based on that. So there are certainly things that we can do as a community, even if amongst the greater Jewish community and amongst the greater world community, there are areas that we can find that are not tragic, but that we can all agree on, that we can all bind together with, we can all find meaning and purpose in. That is what will build us together as a community, not just in the bad times when there's an incident, but even in the good times to bring us together.
No, I was thinking about Israel in this context, as an Israeli, and how when you have a shared purpose, how really it glues you together. It doesn't have to be written somewhere or on the wall, but you feel it, you know. And when you feel like a bit of a loss or this shared purpose being at risk, then what connects us, what unites us? I was also thinking about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and how everyone has the potential to lead. And the more I think about this experience today, people sitting here with us in different sessions, like how each of us have, from all this learning that we're taking in, an opportunity, a potential, a call to lead on these subjects. And we can each play a role in helping people feel less lonely. If we look into each other's eyes, let's say I came on a flight, of course it's easier to put the AirPods and look on my phone, but I said, no, Michal, there's like people around you. You're going to spend 12 hours with them. Took them off and like greeted my neighbors, right? Said, I'm sorry, I have a broken hip. You're gonna stand along, often. Started a conversation, and then they forgave me when I brought out my very smelly kosher food because they forgot to bring me food. And like but then there was a bond, right, and a connection because they understood me. So I'm saying it requires attention, effort, dedication in today's life to build these relationships, but it's completely doable. We just have to believe that this is what matters, and then and take the lead on it.
What happens when there's someone in the community who wants to connect and is lonely, but is very toxic and gives off a very negative energy when they come? And this can happen in any sort of community, even in a family.
The doctor and the rabbi.
No one wants to take that one. No, it's such a hard one. Well, radical curiosity is one of my answers. Is like to come to them with a mindset of curiosity and what is happening with them, because clearly every human has something valuable to offer and has goodness in them. And if they're sending off negative energy, then something is very troubled behind that. And maybe that could be fixed, and maybe that can't be fixed. So again, I'm not a clinician, so I really don't know how to answer that question. But about trying to understand them. Maybe.
I would say maybe one thing to add, just a thought. Certainly, you don't have to martyr your entire community for the sake of one person's connection. You don't have to bring a toxic situation into the crowd because one person needs to have their need filled. It's important that they have their need filled, but it doesn't have to be on everybody else's, cheshbon, on their account. So one way perhaps that might be helpful is that person, if you're a community leader, for example, which in this case you are, perhaps to engage with them in certain other settings, private settings, make them feel welcomed and appreciated and connected with something, but not necessarily always in the grand public situation. Invite them over to, for various purposes, either for a Shabbos or for a discussion, for a coffee, something that they still feel connected, but that they don't have to spread their challenges and their vibe, let's say, with the rest of the community.
I'm with the rabbi. I think that people need to be feeling safe in a community, and that there's the rules of engagement and there's boundaries. I don't think that being in a community means that there's no boundaries of behavior. And when you asked the question, we all thought about that slightly annoying person. I always look
I
at
know that person, right?
I always watch to see how my rabbi responds, or I was like, I was very admiring, but I also think that, it's good for the person itself, themselves, if this boundary of toxicity is put in front of them. I think it's a part of a community leader to be able to put those boundaries.
Dr. Michal and Rabbi, thank you very much.
Click the button below to subscribe to the JLI YouTube channel. It's like a relaxing spa for the soul.